Detective Falls starts to figure out what it's like being a law officer in the land of the dead. But is he meant to be there long term, or is he ever going to find his way out? We're going to talk about it in our review of Dead Detective number 3 from Black Box Comics. See you in 3. And welcome back to Comical Opinions. This is our review of Dead Detective number 3. And in this issue, Detective Falls is drawn deeper and deeper into the workings of the land of the dead. Meanwhile, Officer Falls, his wife, takes up the search for her lost husband in the living world. But before we get started, please like, share, comment, subscribe. Hit that bell for notification. Let us know how we're doing. We greatly appreciate your attention, your comments, and anything you can do to share this out. And stay tuned to the end of this review for our final tally and score. So let's get into the credits. Dead Detective number 3 is written by Bob Hioka, art by Fabio Lima Jansen, colors by Adriano Augusto, letters by Desi Cienti, and the main cover A, is also drawn by Fabio Lima Jansen. So let's talk about what happened in the last issue. Detective Falls is now in the land of the dead, but he didn't get there by dying. He got there by a magical staircase in the middle of the Detroit cemetery where his ex-partner or ex-deceased partner is laid to rest. He comes down to the land of the dead. The name of the city is called Asphodel. And he finds his partner, and they basically start to reconnect and try to figure out what's been happening with each other's lives since they've been separated by death. And we find out that Asphodel is very much like living in the big city, except it's populated by people who are dead, waiting to move on, and many demons. While they're hanging out in a bar/strip joint, the pair is accosted by the Duke, a sort of demon gangster that's resident in the area, and things get very hairy very quickly, including gunfire, grenades, and all kinds of problems, especially when Duke eats Rex Danto, and Detective Falls has to find some way to save his partner, even though his partner's been chewed up pretty badly. Detective Falls saves his partner, or what's left of him, takes him to a mystic, and that's where we leave off. So let's picking up in this issue. Rex Danto is brought back to life by a peddler of medical healing and mystical healing powers and energies, and put together with basically a bunch of used vital organs. They part ways, and they go back to the police station where Rex Danto says, you know what, let's give this guy a badge and a gun. If he's going to be here a while, he might as well join the force. He was my partner in life. He might as well be my partner in death, even though technically speaking, Detective Falls isn't dead. They send him down to one of the onboarding officers, if you will, a gentleman by the name of Giallo, Detective Giallo. And Detective Giallo is a rough customer who gives Detective Falls business and says, you're going to work for me, you're going to spy for me, you're going to tell me everything that Rex Danto does, and you tell me every case that you're working on, or I'm going to kill you right here and you'll never get back to the land of the living. They agree. Rex Danto and Detective Falls, they head out to an area called the 18th door of the Grand Necropolis, where they look for information about future crimes and future murders from one of the demons that is resident there that has the ability to see into the future. Meanwhile, up in the land of the living, Officer Falls, who is Detective Falls' wife, begins to question everyone that might have been around the cemetery at that time to find out what happened to her husband and why. Back in the land of the dead, Detective Falls go through what you call an initiation process from Detective Giallo, and says, go get your badge. He tosses them into a water well with a undead spirit or force that tells him that his wife is in mortal danger. And so now Detective Falls is a member of the police force of Asphodel, which is in the land of the dead, but now he has extra incentive to get back to the living as quickly as possible to make sure that his wife isn't killed by some sort of supernatural or demonic force. And that's where we leave off. If that sounds like a whole lot of weird, crazy stuff happening all at the same time, you are absolutely right. This issue is weird. It's kind of strangely toned in the sense that it's not quite funny, but it's not quite so serious at the same time. It's just sort of people rolling with their circumstances, even though the circumstances might be completely surreal and strange and bizarre for us who are mere mortals living in the earthly realm, or the land of the living, as it were. So that's where we left off. What did we think about Dead Detective number 3? And in a lot of ways, just as an interesting fact, there is a film, if you haven't seen it, starring, I believe it's Joe Piscopo. It's called Dead Heat. Dead Heat is the name of the film. And it's about one or two cops, and it's really more of one of the cops becomes a zombie. It's not really going into the land of the dead, but it has a lot of that same vibe and feel. It's Dead Heat's in that film that came out in 1988, starring Treat Williams and Joe Piscopo. It's a weird film. It's kind of schlocky. It's very of its time. It's very 80s. But if you want to kind of get the tone and the feel of what this story kind of is reminiscent of, check out that film, and there's a lot of overlap there. It doesn't have quite as much of the supernatural going on, but you have some of the same kind of thematic elements of partners where one is alive and one is dead, and they don't quite fit together, but they somehow make it work, kind of like the dead version of The Odd Couple. It's a strange story. It's a strange film, but the tone is also very similar as well in that it's an action buddy flick, but there's a little bit of comedic tone to it, even though it's serious at the same time. You might want to check that out if you're interested. So, what do we think of Dead Detective number 3 from Black Box Comics? I like the chemistry between the two characters, Rex Danto and Detective Falls. Jim Falls is his first name. They're kind of giving you a lot of world building and character building. Bob Hayoka is in this particular issue. You get to understand what the police force is like, what the onboarding process is like, how somebody gets a badge, all these things that are what would taking normal processes that we would see in the living world and putting a supernatural twist on it in the dead world. So there's a lot of interesting world and character building that's going on here. On the flip side, as far as what we didn't like about Dead Detective number 3, there's a lot of world building, but there's not much of story as far as plot and direction, momentum, and what are we trying to accomplish with this story. So far we're in issue number 3, and it's all world building. It's all character building, which is fine, but there's no real plot so far that we can tell, other than Detective Jim Falls is now in the land of the dead, and he's caught up with his old partner who is dead, and they're just sort of like picking up life as though nothing had really ever changed. And okay, well, that's fine. That's a scenario, but it's not really a story. What is Jim's objective? To get back to the land of the living? Okay, it would make sense, but you don't really see him trying very hard to do that. What is Rex Danto's goal in this? Is he just waiting to be brought up into heaven or sent down to hell, moving on from this limbo place? Maybe, but he's not really trying very hard to move in either direction. He's just sort of waiting his time out. And that's what this issue in the series as a whole so far feels like. It feels like a lot of waiting. People just kind of dealing with life as it comes while they wait for whatever's supposed to happen next, which is fine, but that's not much of a story. So it feels a little directionless is what we're trying to get at here. So final thoughts. What do we think of Dead Detective number 3 from Black Box? Good world building, interesting world building, lots of creative ideas and scenarios, and the chemistry between the two detectives is, somewhat charming, which is a good thing. You want to like your leads, and you want them to like each other. They don't have to be perfect. They don't have to get along perfectly, but you at least want them to get along to some degree that makes sense and that feels relatable. And you get all that here. On the downside, the story is lacking. You've got a scenario, and you've got a setting, you've got characters, lots of world building going on, but there's no real plot or that has a goal and a direction and movement in that direction. So it feels a little rudderless. Therefore, we're going to give Dead Detective number 3 from Black Box Comics we're going to give it a 7 out of 10. And that's offset by all the great world building, even though the plot is lacking. So I hope you like this review. Please subscribe to the channel if you'd like some more, and stay tuned through the outro for our next video. Thank you.